The film begins in the past, 15 years ago, when Mr. Emily and his colleagues were working as spies for British intelligence, assigned to a secret mission. During this mission, Emily and her colleague develop an attraction to each other, leading to a secret relationship between them. Later, while in the bathroom, Emily discovers that she is pregnant and confirms it with a pregnancy test. Afterward, they get into their car and head to the mansion, where the mission is to be carried out. They receive instructions through the earpieces from their leader, Chuck, their superior in intelligence. Chuck explains that they must infiltrate the birthday party of the terrorist Gore, the leader of the terrorist organization Falcon, and blend in as guests to gain access to an electronic device called the Key. This device is highly dangerous, as it allows control over England's industrial infrastructure, ports, and nuclear reactors. Upon entering the party, they manage to sneak into the office and open the secret safe, where they find the key and take possession of it. However, alarms quickly go off, alerting the guards. Mr. Emily and his colleague engage in combat against them, successfully defeating the guards and escaping the mansion. As they flee, they are ambushed by Gore's men, but they manage to fight them off using their combat skills until they can escape. Chuck orders them to head to the airport, where their colleague Baron is waiting with a plane ready for their escape. Upon arrival, they meet Baron, bid him farewell, and board the plane, flying to safety. During the flight, Emily tells her colleague that she is pregnant. He expresses immense joy, assuring her that despite the short time they have known each other, he feels she is his soulmate and wants to stay with her to raise the child together. However, Emily shares her concerns, believing that having and raising a child conflicts with their dangerous lifestyle as spies, something she understands well from personal experience. Her colleague tries to reassure her, confident that they will find a solution, and expresses his deep happiness at this opportunity, as he has always dreamed of having a family. Suddenly, Emily feels unwell and asks to go to the restroom, but the flight attendant informs her that it is out of service. She immediately senses that something is wrong and exchanges a look with her colleague, who quickly realizes that Gore's men are on board. At that moment, the attendant grabs her, threatening her with a gun and demanding that her colleague return the key they had stolen. Her colleague is forced to toss the key toward him, but at the crucial moment, Emily twists the attendant's arm, giving her colleague the chance to attack him. Just then, Gore's other men appear, and a fierce fight breaks out inside the plane. Emily and her colleague use their combat skills to take on the attackers, but one of Gore's men picks up a gun from the floor, loads a bullet, and aims at Emily. At the last second, her colleague intervenes, grabbing the gun, which causes the bullet to veer off course, but it hits the aircraft, causing immediate damage. The plane begins an emergency descent and crashes into an icy mountain, breaking apart on impact. It continues to slide across the ice at high speed, heading toward a dangerous cliff. At that moment, Emily and her colleague rush to the parachute storage inside the plane, only to find that there is only one parachute available. Her colleague urges Emily to take the parachute and jump to save herself and the baby she is carrying. However, Emily refuses to leave him behind. She holds on to him tightly and jumps with him, opening the parachute so that they hang on to it together. They manage to survive the plane crash and land safely on the ground. After catching their breath, Emily asks her colleague if this is the life they want to continue, especially now that they know they are going to be parents. She tells him that their child deserves a normal life with loving and protective parents. She then adds that the key, which they were supposed to return to England, has been lost, and everyone will assume they perished in the plane crash, giving them the perfect opportunity to disappear. Furthermore, she suggests traveling to America and starting a new life, where they can build a family away from danger. Her colleague finds the idea appealing and agrees, and together they decide to leave their past as spies behind and embark on a new future. 15 years pass, and we move to the present, where they now live in the United States and have a daughter named Elise and another son. They try to put the past behind them and focus on raising their children properly. One day, they take their children to school. As they say goodbye, the father advises his son to take care of himself and gives him a ring equipped with a tracking device, which he can press if he ever needs help. The ring also contains sensors to measure blood pressure and blood sugar levels, as the boy has a chronic illness. Meanwhile, Emily watches her daughter Elise from a distance using binoculars, a habit she hasn't been able to break due to her past as a spy. As she observes, she sees Elise kissing a classmate, leaving her stunned, as her daughter is only 14 years old. However, she and her husband remain inside the car, silently watching the scene. Suddenly, Elise calls them on the phone, telling them that she noticed them watching her, which embarrasses her greatly in front of her friends. After that, Mr. Emily and his wife return home, where Emily, driven by concern, tries to access their daughter's laptop to check if she is engaging in any inappropriate behavior. Using her experience, she easily guesses the password and logs into the device to review her messages. Through the conversations, she discovers that Elise plans to go out with her friends, accompanied by her friend Lily in her car. Realizing they need to intervene before their daughter gets involved in anything reckless, they rush to the meeting spot. When they attempt to take her home, some young men at the scene step in, preventing them from taking her and provoking them with taunts. Emily is forced to use her combat skills, swiftly taking down the young men who tried to block their way. One of them records a video of her on his phone and presses the upload button. Immediately, Mr. Emily snatches the phone from him, deletes the video, and then takes Emily and their daughter Elise outside before quickly leaving the scene. During the car ride, Elise realizes that her parents hacked into her laptop and read her messages. Enraged, she accuses them of constantly spying on her. Shocked, she questions where they learned their combat skills. They reply that they took some taekwondo lessons a long time ago, but she doesn't believe them. Insistence that they are hiding a big secret from her, she storms off to her room in frustration. The next morning, the doorbell rings. When they open the door, they are shocked to find Chuck, their former boss from British intelligence 15 years ago. He tells them that he discovered they were still alive after seeing the viral video of their fight at the nightclub. He also reveals that the Falcon organization never found the key after the plane crash, and that Gore, the leader of the organization, has been searching for them all these years, convinced that they still have it. Emily tries to convince Chuck that the key was lost in the crash, but he insists that they are in danger because Gore is convinced otherwise. As they talk, a sniper's bullet shatters the window and strikes Chuck, killing him instantly before their eyes. Shocked, they quickly run inside the house, while a hail of bullets rains down from outside. They rush to the garage and jump into their car in an attempt to escape. As the car exits the garage, Gore's men open fire on it. However, when they approach, they realize the car is empty. It was just a distraction. Meanwhile, Emily and her husband have already taken another vehicle to flee. A fierce chase ensues, and during it, Emily questions why they are still being pursued if they don't have the key. That's when her husband confesses that he never left the key to be lost in the plane wreckage. He kept it safe to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Emily is stunned, having never known this, and a heated argument starts between them. But the intense pursuit leaves them no time to talk. Her husband quickly explains that he hid the key in a safe place, her mother's house in England, and that they must travel there immediately to retrieve it and hand it over to British intelligence for protection. Furious, Emily demands to know why he chose her mother's house specifically, to which he responds that it was the safest place he could think of. At that moment, one of Gore's cars pulls up beside them and opens fire. Acting fast, her husband grabs a soda bottle, drops a piece of candy inside, and tosses it into the pursuing car. The chemical reaction causes the liquid to foam violently, obstructing the driver's vision. The car spins out of control and flips over, allowing them to escape. Without delay, they head to Elise and Lee's school and take them along. They tell the children that they are traveling to England to visit their grandmother. The kids are surprised, as they never knew they had a grandmother living there. Emily had always avoided talking about her mother. Elise and Lee sense that something is off, especially since their parents' explanation doesn't make much sense. Emily tries to reassure them, asking them to follow instructions for now and promising to explain everything later. On the plane, Emily and her husband hesitate about telling their children the truth. Emily believes that lying to them might be the only way to keep them safe. She thinks it's best if they never learn about their parents' past as spies. Upon arriving at the airport in England, they rent a car and head toward Emily's mother's house. On the way, they instruct the kids to avoid using the internet or their phones. Elise and Lee don't understand why their parents are forbidding them from using the internet or their devices, but they remain silent. When they stop at a gas station, their father gives them some money to buy a snack from the restaurant. However, they disobey orders. Lee secretly turns on the internet on a hidden device. Shortly after, Emily and her husband notice Gore's men arriving at the station. Acting quickly, her husband grabs the fuel hose and ignites his lighter, using the flames as a threat to keep them at bay. Meanwhile, Emily engages in a fierce fight against the attackers. Inside the restaurant, Elise and Lee watch in shock as their parents fight. Thanks to their combat skills, Emily and her husband overpower Gore's men. They then rush back to the car and speed away from the scene. As they drive, Elise and Lee demand an explanation for what they just witnessed. Their parents are left with no choice but to confess the truth. They were spies for British intelligence 15 years ago, and the men chasing them were members of the Falcon organization. Elise and Lee are stunned, but this revelation finally explains the many odd things about their parents. While Elise remains quiet and deeply affected, Lee, being a spy movie fanatic, is thrilled. However, he then admits that he used the internet on a hidden device. Furious, his father grabs the device and tosses it out of the car to eliminate any tracking risks. When they reach their destination, Elise and Lee are shocked to discover that their grandmother's home is actually a massive mansion. As they step inside, they find their grandmother, Jenny, engrossed in bird hunting with her rifle. It turns out that Jenny was also a former British intelligence spy. She welcomes them inside and introduces them to her much younger boyfriend, Nigel, who offers to give Elise and Lee a tour of the estate. Meanwhile, Emily and her husband sit down with Jenny and explain everything about the Key and the Falcon organization that is hunting them. The conversation reveals the strained relationship between Emily and her mother. Jenny criticizes her for never visiting or even telling her grandchildren about her existence. Emily defends herself, saying she wanted her children to have a normal childhood, far from the harsh life she endured because of her mother's spy work. Elise, overhearing the conversation, finally understands why her mother kept their past a secret. She wanted to protect them from the dangers she herself had faced growing up. At the same time, Emily's husband takes her to a hidden bunker near the mansion, where he had concealed the key. As soon as they retrieve it, they hear the sound of a helicopter landing at the estate and rush back. Upon their return, they find that Gore's men have stormed the mansion, tying up Jenny and Nigel. Worse, Elise and Lee are being held hostage, leaving Emily and her husband with no choice but to surrender. Emily's husband holds up the key, offering to hand it over in exchange for their children's safety. But suddenly, to their shock, Chuck appears before them. They had been certain he was killed by a sniper's bullet. Chuck reveals that he never actually died. He was dismissed from British intelligence after failing to recover the key following the plane crash. Losing the key was deemed an unacceptable failure by the agency, which led to Chuck's dismissal and the ruin of his life. Seeking revenge, he chose to betray British intelligence and join forces with Gore to track down Emily and her husband, ensuring they would retrieve the key and hand it over to him without suspicion. His deception worked perfectly. Tricking them into believing he was dead forced them to lead him straight to the key. At that moment, Jenny, having secretly freed herself, sneaks into the kitchen where she had hidden a weapon. Grabbing a tranquilizer bow, she begins taking down Gore's men one by one. Despite her age, she proves that her combat skills as a former spy remain sharp. Meanwhile, Chuck notices the commotion outside and tries to act fast. Emily and her husband seize the opportunity to attack two of his men, disarming them. But before they can fully regain control, Chuck grabs Elise and Lee, threatening to kill them. Suddenly, two more of Gore's men sneak up behind Emily and her husband, knocking them unconscious. Taking advantage of the situation, Chuck drags Elise and Lee to the waiting helicopter and takes off, leaving the mansion behind. When Emily and her husband regained consciousness, Jenny informed them that Chuck had kidnapped their children. They immediately rushed to check the surveillance footage, where they noticed that Lee was signaling to them during the abduction. Upon closer examination, they realized he was trying to alert them that he was wearing a tracking ring, allowing them to pinpoint his location. Sure enough, they tracked the signal and discovered that Chuck was holding the children in a museum by the river. As night fell, Emily and her husband arrived at the museum, where Chuck had organized a secret auction to sell the key to Gore's rivals in exchange for a massive fortune. To demonstrate the key's power, Chuck contacted his assistant via radio and ordered her to use it to cut off the city's electricity entirely, then restore it moments later. This spectacle left the bidders astonished, proving the key's immense capabilities. Not stopping there, Chuck then commanded his assistant to remotely open the river's floodgate, an action that, if left unchecked, could submerge the entire city. Within moments, the floodgate was unlocked, escalating the danger. Meanwhile, Emily and her husband attempted to sneak into the museum, but security guards blocked their way. A fierce fight broke out, where the couple utilized their combat skills to overpower the guards and move further inside. Suddenly, Barron, their former colleague, appeared with intelligence agents, revealing that he had been aware of Chuck's betrayal and theft of the key. He also disclosed that he had secretly worked alongside Gore to build a case against Chuck. With this revelation, they proceeded inside together, intent on capturing him. Upon seeing them, Chuck realized his plan had been exposed and made a run for it. Emily and her husband sprinted after him, determined to catch him. However, as soon as they exited the museum, two of Gore's men on motorcycles blocked their path, armed with pistols. At that crucial moment, Jenny, positioned at a strategic vantage point, took aim with a sniper rifle. Relying on her sharpshooting skills, she swiftly neutralized both assailants. Seizing the opportunity, Emily and her husband commandeered one of the motorcycles and sped toward the river, chasing the boat where Chuck had taken the children. But before they could get close, Gore's men pursued them on motorcycles, opening fire as the high-speed chase unfolded. Meanwhile, Chuck contacted his assistant Denver via radio, instructing her to meet him on the other side of the river and bring the key with her. Emily managed to shake off her pursuers and rushed to reach the boat before it passed the open bridge, which would make catching up to it impossible. As she searched for a way to cross the river, she seized a speedboat and took off. Moments later, her husband jumped in beside her, and together they headed toward the boat. At that moment, Nigel, Jenny's lover, was waiting for her in his car behind the museum. By chance, he spotted Denver leaving the scene and immediately rammed her car to stop her. As he approached, he found her unconscious, with the key and the laptop she had been using to control it beside her. Nigel quickly called Jenny and informed her that he had obtained the key. She instructed him to use it to close the open bridge immediately. He attempted to operate the laptop and control the key, but at first, he struggled to get it to work. Meanwhile, Emily and her husband boarded the boat and engaged in a fight with Chuck's men. At the same time, Nigel persisted in his attempts until he finally managed to decrypt the system and issued the command to close the bridge. The bridge began lowering just as the boat approached at high speed, making a collision imminent. Emily shouted at Ellis and Leo, ordering them to jump into the water immediately. They obeyed without hesitation, leaping off just in time. Simultaneously, her husband fought Chuck, and Emily joined in, striking him before the two jumped from the boat. Moments later, the speeding boat crashed into the bridge and exploded into flames. Emily, her husband, and their children emerged safely from the water. Her husband was proud of Leo for his quick thinking in signaling them through the surveillance cameras using his hand, which wore the tracking ring. Emily embraced her daughter Ellis and then hugged her mother Jenny as they all walked away from the scene together. After everything that had happened, Emily and her husband vowed never to return to the world of espionage and instead live a peaceful life with their family. Sometime later, Ellis was on a soccer field, preparing to take a decisive penalty kick. She successfully scored the goal, securing victory for her team. Her parents were overjoyed and proud of her, celebrating the moment with her. After the match, Emily spoke to Ellis, telling her she was now free to go out with her friends whenever she pleased, and promising not to spy on or monitor her again. Ellis agreed, on the condition that she would always take care of herself. Emily and her husband then got into their car, but as soon as they drove off, they were startled to find Barron sitting in the back seat. Shocked, they turned to him, and he revealed that Chuck's body had not been found after the boat explosion, meaning he could still be alive. Then, with a serious expression, he added, "We need you for a new mission." The film ended with this thrilling revelation,